All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're running a day late, dollar behind here, but we're going to try and take a quick peek at the Articles of Confederation, the precursor to our modern-day Constitution, how they fit into the history of our country. So first off, these documents were written in 1777. John Dickinson was a Pennsylvania representative at the Second Continental Congress and wrote these. He is considered to be kind of our wartime government. Then in 1781, while the war is still going on, is considered to be our first national constitution, the first official government of the United States. This document called the Articles of Confederation. Now, the big fear here we have is that, too much power went into one person. Everyone blamed King George III, this lovely looking dude right here, for all the problems in the country. And so because they're blaming King George III, our number one fear in this country at the time is monarchy. And so the goal is that they want to make sure they take all the power out of one person's hands and limit the power of that central government so they cannot become a tyrannical government like they feel they were experiencing underneath the British. And so when they made this document, they had a lot of weaknesses, okay? This Confederation was essentially a loose collection of states. It was a loose organization of 13 independent countries. They were all kind of tied together by this one national kind of regulating force. But Congress, the National Congress, had no power to raise taxes whatsoever. They had no power for tax raising, so they couldn't make any money. They had no power to regulate foreign or state trade, so they couldn't put tariffs or anything on trade because of the trade fears that had happened early on with the British and colonials. If they make a law, 9 out of 13 states had to approve a law, so you had to have what was called a supermajority for every single law that was passed to make sure that all the states were okay with it. Every state had one vote. And lastly, Congress had no enforcement policy. All the enforcement policy was placed up to the individual states. They could choose to enforce national laws as they wanted to, or just enforce their own laws. Now, they did do a couple good things. So one is that the Treaty of Paris, 1783, that being the treaty that ends the Revolutionary War, was signed during this time. They did take care of all the western land that was gained by that Treaty of Paris. And little things, they could declare war, print money, make treaties, settle state disputes, little things that this Confederation had that did work out in some ways. The two biggest strengths we look at, two biggest victories for this document were the Land Ordinance 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance later on. So this took all this land to the west, and this land right here, okay, so here are states out here, okay, and here's this northwestern land. So all up to the Mississippi is what the United States got in their peace treaty with the British, and every single state basically claimed right straight across. They're like, yeah, that's not fair. Okay, we had, New York was claiming parts of Wisconsin and so on and so forth. And so what did it started using a land survey system, a grid system that established 6-mile blocks of land out there. And that was the way they were going to try and divide that land up, make sure land got to people who need it. They made sure that within those blocks there were townships, and then ranges and townships kind of broken down so that you could sell that land very easily. A chunk of that land would go to schools, a chunk of that land would go to churches, and it would be easy to settle that northwestern land. Northwestern Ordinance also figured out how they would do statehood, right? If you have 5,000 free males who own 50 acres of land, you can start your own government, become a quote-unquote territory. And at 60,000 people, you could then apply to become a state and be entered into the Union as a state. So they have a way for the United States to start expanding, okay? Another thing this did is that it kind of makes sure that it was an orderly stuff. It wasn't just a whole, mass run towards the West. They're going to have a way to make sure that this is going to be a fair system as well as an orderly system to settle all this land. Because remember before, the only thing that people wanted to get out of this whole revolution was land. And so it said that there would not be slavery west of this line. Whoops. Okay, that'll change down here. It promised education with one section of each 6-square-mile township will be going to education. There's freedom of religion out here. There'll be no religious requirements, and there'll be trial by jury for everybody. The other problem we had too out here was that in Northwest Territory, you eventually make up these states of Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan. The British were still there. The British honestly never left. They still had forts up here, Fort Howard in Wisconsin, Prairie du Chien, French forts they had taken over. The British were still out here. There's no way the United States would come out here with an army and physically eject them. And so there would be later treaties that you have to do up until almost 1815 to know that there were still British in this area, settled and doing trade and that kind of stuff. In class, we'll do some documents and try to figure out the good and effective things about this document. We'll do that in class. But there were some problems with this document, and a lot of times this document is seen in history as a big problem. And so the problems that the government was having is that since the federal government couldn't raise money, and since states didn't have to follow laws, it was a big problem. Okay, there was no way that the federal government could raise money and pay for things they had to pay for, like armies and that kind of stuff. And since each state had its own laws, it would have made it difficult for the country to act in a really united way. Every single state was acting in its own best interest, which, in theory would be fine, but wasn't really working so far. The biggest issue is that Congress had to pay back debts from the Revolution. When Congress didn't have something, it would be food, shelter, guns, etc., they'd take them and write IOUs. If they couldn't write the soldiers' paychecks that month, they would write them an IOU. And so now Congress is in debt. They have to pay back all these war debts. The states got to pay back their debts, okay? And we couldn't get enough commerce to happen, and there's no taxes being collected to pay back all these debts. So, debt's a big problem. And top it up, there's no executive branch. There's no president, if you will. And so the government couldn't have one person kind of say, defend the borders or get the British out of Northwest Territory. Every state had their own militia. And if, the country was going to go to war, they could choose to send soldiers or not. But they, New York would be like, I don't feel like doing this. Or Georgia would be like, I don't feel like doing this, and not send soldiers. There's no national executive branch saying you must do this. There's no national court system. So even if the Confederate legislature passed a law, there's nobody saying that it would enforce it. And to top it off, if they wanted to amend the Articles of Confederation, okay, they want to change it, you'd have all 13 states agree with it. And when they tried amending it, it just wasn't working. And so the AOC was extremely, extremely hard to modify, and they couldn't fix the loopholes within this document. So here we have something happen in Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, we have what's called Shays Rebellion. And what happened to this guy, Daniel Shays, you can see him in this etching right here, okay? He was an officer during the Revolutionary War. While he was gone fighting the Revolutionary War, he wasn't home working on his farm, so he didn't grow anything, didn't make any money. Well, he was fighting, and he's on back pay. He wasn't getting a money paid to him either, and so their farm went into debt. They had to borrow money to try and keep their farm. Well, all the farmers now, by Massachusetts and other states, are required to pay their debt in gold. And these guys have no money. They weren't making money during the war because they were out fighting. They weren't farming. And because, they weren't getting paid, they haven't gotten their paychecks yet from the war. So this guy, Daniel Shays, is kind of stuck. You know what I mean? A lot of times wealthy lawmakers would invest their money in the war. Okay. They would give, like a war bond kind of thing. And, a lot of times these farmers, had to sell their farms off to these, rich lawmakers, just the money to pay the debts off. So they'd sell their debts to some people later on. A guy named Job Shattuck was the biggest landowner in Massachusetts, and he basically bought acres of land for pennies on the dollar. Later on, he got killed in this revolution, by the way. But he would, rip these farmers off, pennies on the dollar for their land because there's a chance to get money. And so what happens is all these poor farmers in Massachusetts, these are war heroes, right, that kind of stuff. They're not represented in the legislature. They can't, they have no land now. They can't vote. They can't run for office, and they can't pass debt relief laws. And so they start rebelling and start attacking courthouses and that kind of stuff. They go to debtors' prisons and open them up. So they attack courthouses, and so they can stop having the hearings that are going against farmers' farms. They have to have a bankruptcy hearing or a repo hearing, and they stop those. It got so bad that John Hancock, who is now serving as governor of Massachusetts, has to resign from office out of fear of A, his life, and B, his political career. And so we have people in Massachusetts in open rebellion attacking state government buildings right now because of these economic troubles. Well, Massachusetts militias called to stop it. The poor farmers in 1979, when they elect officials who support their stands, they close the courthouses down, and they say, Congress, help us out. Get us help for these people. Unfortunately, Congress has no money either. This was a big eye opener to a lot of people in the big lawmakers of the country, all the way up and down the eastern seaboard, as news of these rebellions spread. And people were like, wow, if they're rebelling in Massachusetts, maybe they'll rebel somewhere else. Now, think about Shays' Rebellion, though. When the government's doing something wrong and the government's not taking care of you, what seems to be our number one way of reacting right now? That's right, rebellion. So, in a way of me going about this, they thought, hey, when British were treating us poorly, we rebelled. When Massachusetts is treating us poorly, not taking care of us, we rebel too. And so maybe that's why they're doing what they're going to do. In fact, Samuel Adams, who was, one of the lawmakers in Massachusetts, he writes a quote. He says, "Rebelling against the king may be pardoned or lightly punished, but a man who dares to rebel against the laws of the republic ought to suffer death." So see, some of the opinions have changed now as these guys who are the rebels are now in office. Things changed a little bit in terms of what happened. Adams, when he was in office, also wrote something called the Riot Act, which prohibited 12 more people from meeting at one time, and the government had power to shoot the rioters. I mean, things have changed a lot since 1776 when he was doing this kind of stuff as well. Now, this leads to a move for more constitutional reform. Political ideology has changed after the Revolution until the late Confederation period, okay? In the late 1770s, it was tyranny the greatest threat. By mid-1780s, ordinary citizens who lack virtue are the greatest threat, because now our regular citizens who think they have all these rights and natural rights, all that kind of stuff, are saying, well, this isn't fair. We need to rebel now. This Articles of Confederation was so weak because we feared tyranny, and that was a big issue. We were so scared of tyranny at this point, we read that really, really weak Articles of Confederation, this loose collection of states with no strong federal government. And so now, instead of being tyranny or being our problem, we had too much democracy. We were literally too democratic to function and actually couldn't get anything done because of the, fear of tyranny before and the way we designed this government. And so Shays' Rebellion helps prove this point to a lot of guys like George Washington and James Madison and people who later on write the Constitution. And so with 1787, everyone kind of knows that the Articles of Confederation aren't working, right? With Shays' Rebellion happening, people losing their farms, debtors' prison going down, open rebellion in Massachusetts against courthouse, those kind of things. Congress, we have a meeting in, it didn't send an army, didn't have money for an army to put things down. And so, in fact, merchants in Massachusetts had to hire their own mercenaries to end uprisings, because the militia couldn't even fight. And so that was a big problem they had in terms of ending uprising. And so we start with something called the Annapolis Convention, 1787. And this James Madison led this group. They met in Annapolis, Maryland. It's supposed to be about trade originally. It's supposed to talk about trade, way to improve American money and American economy. But by the end, they called for this meeting in Philadelphia to discuss these articles and revise it. So this Annapolis Convention, they kind of sat down and said, you know what? We have bigger problems here than trade. We need to look at our fundamental government changes. How can we revise this document? And that meeting in Annapolis is what leads us to a meeting later on, that summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, which will be where we write the new Constitution. It basically said we need to do this now. Like people said, there was an urgency for a strong national government to actually fix these problems versus what we had been doing. So you kind of see what happens here, right? The Constitution comes out of this issue of, a lot of fear, right? Fear of central government, and new states want to make sure they keep their government. And states have different needs and interests, and you have these united 13 states, right? Well, we have problems then. Okay, we have a weak Articles of Confederation. We can't respond to a foreign attack. We can't do economic problems. We have no power to attack, protect property, do anything. And that's going to lead us to revise the Articles and make a new document called the Constitution. We're going to stop there, ladies and gentlemen. This is for the Articles of Confederation Day. We'll take a look at these in class. And then we'll talk about the Constitution a couple days after and how we found that Constitution in our history. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.